So I'm here today to talk about Outcast. Nope. Still nope. Getting closer. Now that's the ticket.
Yes, we're talking about Outcast.
The TV series that recently started on Cinemax aired June 3rd with its first episode. That was written by Robert Kirkman, who has written the comic series of the same name. So, you know that Cinemax is trying to cash in on the same franchise bonuses that AMC has with The Walking Dead. But Kirkman's first episode, A Darkness Surrounds Him, certainly seems to share quite a bit in common with his comics, and it also is given a lot more room to feature all of the violence and the swears and whatever else Kirkman wants to throw in that AMC can't do because of the nature of cable television. This episode, A Darkness Surrounds Him, was directed by Adam Wingard, who you probably know from quite a few other horror films. Pretty prominent director now these days. And Outcast really makes a grand showing in its first few minutes as we follow a little boy tracking a bug across a wall and kind of looking sickly, very itchy. And that's not so uncommon when there's bugs in the house, but this little boy in particular seems to be possessed by something. And the whole point of Outcast is that people are becoming possessed a lot more frequently than normal. So someone's got to do something about it. And this town in Virginia, known as Rome, is one of the towns that has had the most possessions within this town. So throughout the first episode, we kind of see the whole inner workings of what Outcast is offering to us. At first, it's not really clear, and especially like me, if you haven't read the comic series, it's not really evident right from the beginning what exactly the show is going to be about and who it's following. But as the television show moves forward, we kind of see that we're going to be following this one man who has had some possession experience in his life, unfortunately, and he is one of our protagonists. Joining him is another pastor, who is trying to prevent all of these possessions within the town and trying to fix them. And both of them work together in this first episode to try to figure out what's going on with the little boy, how to fix it, and how to facilitate these exorcisms, because they can't just leave the little boy to his own devices, who has been clearly possessed by some sort of demonic entity. And so they're left to figure out what to do with him and how to stop the possession from occurring. Now, the first episode is a little bit slow. There are a few scenes that really make it stand out, and the violence and the scares that Wingard directs they're very good. And that's the first thing that I noticed, especially in that first scene. I don't really want to ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen the episode yet, but it's a really surprising moment, and it actually works really well, especially with Wingard's atmosphere that he's created throughout the entire piece. A lot of the music is very brooding, but also downplayed so that it's not featured up front within the television episode. And that's good, because that allows for a lot of the atmosphere to come through. It is filled with a lot of darkness, as the episode title suggests. The darkness surrounds him. So, you know, that in itself is going to be something that Outcast is really going to have to figure out how to play with. Kyle, the main character, who is the man who has been plagued by these possessions for so long, is kind of a very dark and kind of a downer, really. I mean, Patrick Fugit, he does play him pretty well as Kyle, but at the same time, I feel like in this first episode, there's a little bit too much of the depression that we get from Kyle. It's very, very drawn out, and Patrick Fugit is really forced into making Kyle someone who the audience actually has a hard time, figuring out. I would say that I don't think that he's a super interesting character at this point from this first episode. He's not someone that you really want to want to follow and figure out his past and what's been happening with him. Darkness Surrounds Him really does give him quite a bit of backstory. We find out that in when he was a boy, his mother seemed to have the same sort of possession, locked him in a closet, and we keep returning to that within this episode. We keep seeing that image of his mother kind of first nurturing him and then dragging him by the hair into the closet, throwing him in there and locking him in with a wooden spoon. It's a good image, and it really sets the tone for what Outcast is going to present and why Kyle is so passionate about working with people who are possessed. But at the same time, there's nowhere to go with that. I'm not sure where exactly they can take it from here, since the first episode has kind of already dealt with that dark past. At the same time, there is some room for Outcast to explore some of his relationships with his mother in the beginning and where it all started. And also to delve into exactly when this occurred. Maybe that's not the first occurrence of him encountering possessions and demonic entities. So there is still room to grow in that regard. One of the more interesting things is that Outcast gives Kyle a backstory that actually involves his, well, we're not really sure. It involves his significant other and their daughter, where there's a couple flashbacks and a couple references to how he hurt his daughter in the past. And we kind of do flash back to that towards the end of A Darkness Surrounds Him. We see that it wasn't really Kyle who did it, but it was his significant other, Allison, who seemed to be harming their daughter because she was also possessed. So there's a lot of that possession aspect that surrounds Kyle, and he's really trying to figure out exactly how he ties into all of this. At the same time, I did really like A Darkness Surrounds Him, but it is a very dreary and depressing first episode, and it really, I think that the slow pace and the fact that Kyle isn't a super interesting character kind of hinders this first episode. Not that it's not good, and not that there's not room for him to grow and to kind of come into his own as a character, but at the same time, I feel like they could have done a little bit more to just make him a bit more interesting, a bit more dynamic, rather than this kind of depressed and aloof character that he is right now. At the same time, we do get a little bit of that comedy aspect at Kirkman trying to bring things up a little bit, bring things into the light. One of them is Kyle's sister, Megan, who works with him to try to get him out of the house. He's returned to the house that he used to stay in when he was a boy, when all of those bad things happened to him with his mother. And he really, at the beginning of the episode, he's really refused to leave the house for, I think they say, about 5 months now. So he's been shacked up in there, leaving bowls everywhere, and Megan's coming in very upset that there has been no maid coming in. He hasn't left the house. He's only eating cereal. He's probably got loose poops. No solid poops is how she puts it. So she takes him out shopping, brings him to her house. We get to meet her daughter. We get to meet her husband, who seems like kind of a dick. It's not a pleasant place for Kyle to go, especially because they kind of not really blame him, but at the same time they feel like he's very, very odd and strange, and they don't really want him around their children. So, but Megan is really accepting of Kyle, and she wants to put him on the right path. So she's kind of a fun character, and that's one of the things where Outcast kind of finds some light, is with those secondary characters who kind of add some comedy and Kirkman's funny dialogue to the episode. So I did like that about Outcast's first episode quite a bit, and I'm hoping we get to see more of Megan, and I'm hoping we get to see more of Reverend Anderson as well, because he seems like a very interesting character, kind of pushed to do his work with the church, even though now he has definitely seen demonic forces at play. That's kind of pushed him even more towards his work, and especially because he helped with Kyle. He worked with him, and he knows the capabilities that Kyle has. For some reason that we kind of get a glimpse of in this episode, Kyle has the ability to cast out those demons, which There's the name for you. Um, but he has this ability, and it seems to be linked somehow to maybe his blood. We kind of get that quickly when he's exorcising the demon from the little boy in this first episode. So there's room for that to grow, and but it does give Kyle some sort of purpose, which I think is necessary for Outcast right now, because in this first episode, like I said before, that issue with how Kyle is and kind of cast out from the rest of the town in Rome. He needs a purpose, and I think that we're working on that in this first episode. So, one of the things about Outcast is that since it's on Cinemax, it does get a lot more time, a lot more running time to kind of play with its plot. And so this one clocks in about 55 minutes. I think it's a little bit long, but other than that, I think that extended running time is going to give us a chance to meet some of these secondary characters, like Megan and her husband Mark, and we're also going to be able to see a little bit more of that past and how it relates to Allison, who's um, Kyle's significant other. So there's some room for those character developments, which was always lacking within The Walking Dead, and maybe now it has become a little bit better within that show. But here, I think they're trying to rectify that very quickly, making sure that some of those extra characters, the secondary characters, have some sort of development, maybe not significant, but at least a little bit. So there are these areas within Outcast that we definitely want to take longer looks at, and I think that that is hinted at. And moving forward, I'm excited to see where the show actually heads to and how it can make the forces of evil seem very evilly and dominant. Because right now, Kyle's ability to kind of bleed into the demon and get rid of it seems like it's too easy. So I'm sure that that's going to change and that will expand as the show moves forward. But as a premiere episode, A Darkness Surrounds Him is really good. And besides its length and the issues with its main character right now, I'm excited to see where this goes. And it certainly seems like a promising series because of its scares right in this first episode. It's very atmospheric. There are a couple of really good scenes of very surprising moments that don't really, and not really rely on jump scares, but more so the slow build that Wingard directs with. Just that it's moving glacially, no change, and then all of a sudden there's a quick change that really scares the viewer. So very promising, and I hope to see more of Outcast. I don't get Cinemax right now, so I had to watch it online. So don't tell anybody. But I'm very excited for it, and I really want to see where this show goes and where Kirkman can take this. And not having read the comics, it's all new to me. It's all fresh. So I would be interested in seeing how this episode relates to the actual comic series, though. If you have read it before, leave me some comments. Does this seem like straight out of the comic, or have they taken liberties? Has Kirkman kind of changed things around now, writing for this first episode to adhere to television and to make sure that it's kind of different from his comic series? I'm always interested in that, and to see how they adapt to television when that source material is already out there, so they don't want to just copy that and make sure that they're moving in a different direction, or at least having changes that make sense for television. So leave me a comment and let me know exactly what you thought of how it differs or how it's similar to the comic series, and then again what you thought about the entirety of the show. Are you excited to see this moving forward? Did it not really pique your interest? I will admit that at some points it did seem like a pretty generic exorcism show. It didn't do a whole lot to change things with the exorcism or how it works. But there are some interesting aspects, like the soul stealing. Seems like they can draw your soul out from your mouth. So that's something that I'm sure we'll be exploring in weeks to come. But I hope to keep doing coverage of Outcast as long as you want to watch it. And I will be back next week for another review of the new episode, and we'll keep following it. And so that means that you should really subscribe to me on YouTube and check out the website as well, themoonisdeadworld.net, where I will post the video review up. I won't be doing actual written reviews of it, but you can always watch my cute little face. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week for more Outcast coverage.